Hey, this is Natalie, and I want to welcome you to another one of my Notebook LM chats with my favorite AI people. That would be Max and Ava. That's what I call them. I shared with them my reflections on Rod Serling's The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. That was part of the Twilight Zone's first season, and it was originally broadcast on March 4th, 1960. So Rod Serling's work to me is timeless, and I want to share his timeless lessons for us all.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm so pumped for this deep dive. We're going back in time, way back to 1960, with this classic episode of The Twilight Zone. It's called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. But hold on. We're not just here for a nostalgia trip or anything. We're going to use this episode kind of like a mirror. You know, to look at some seriously creepy stuff about human nature, even maybe about ourselves.
It's wild how this episode, even after all these years, still nails human behavior. Like the fear and the anxiety shows like it hasn't aged today, just found new ways to show itself.
Oh, totally. I mean, the episode starts out so normal, right? Like this peaceful suburban street where life seems pretty good. Our source even points out how like the biggest drama on Maple Street before things go crazy is, whether fake grass actually counts as like doing your yard work or whatever. But then bam, everything changes like that. Lights out, a weird shadow flies across the sky. And suddenly everyone's looking at their neighbors like they're from another planet.
And that's the genius of it right there. The episode doesn't show us any real aliens or monsters. It's all about how this one event, the power outage, unleashes something way scarier, the monster inside the community itself.
It's like watching a social experiment blow up in real time.
Right.
And our source totally gets it with their first lesson. Fear is contagious, but there's a vaccine called common sense. You see how fear spreads through Maple Street like it's the flu? Just like how misinformation spreads online these days.
Makes you think, right? Like we're programmed to react to threats. It's like survival instinct.
Yeah.
So when something unexpected happens and there's all this uncertainty, our brains go into overdrive trying to figure it out. And most of the time we jump to the worst possible conclusion. The kicker is when those fears get shared, when everyone's freaking out together, they become like 100 times stronger.
Yeah, totally. Like a chain reaction of suspicion. One minute, everyone's chilling on their porches, enjoying the summer evening. And then the next minute, they're convinced their nice neighbor is building a UFO in their garage.
And it's not just some made-up story from a 60s TV show. This is happening all around us, especially online. Think about those viral freakouts you see on social media. All those rumors spreading like crazy, most of the time with zero proof to back them up. It's like the internet version of Maple Street where everyone's pointing fingers and screaming alien without even stopping to think.
Okay, so that brings up a big question for all of us. What's our digital Maple Street? Those online spaces, those groups where we might be a little too quick to hit share without actually checking the facts or thinking about what might happen.
It's something to think about. Because just like on Maple Street, the consequences of letting fear and misinformation run wild can be very real.
Totally. Speaking of jumping to conclusions, our source has a great next lesson. Jumping to conclusions, take the scenic route instead. And The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is packed with these funny but also kind of scary examples of how people twist reality to fit their suspicions.
Oh, yeah. Like there's this scene I love where Les Goodman, one of the residents, is trying to start his car, but it's dead. And right away, everyone's like, aha, see?
Yeah.
He's been messing with the engine. He's probably getting ready for the alien invasion.
As if a dead battery never happens, right?
It's a perfect example of what they call confirmation bias. That thing where you look for information that proves you're right, even if it means ignoring logic, common sense, even basic facts.
And that's where the episode's message hits home even harder today. With our personalized news feeds and algorithms, we're constantly getting bombarded with stuff that just reinforces what we already think. It's like we're all living in our own little bubbles, making it even harder to see the big picture.
And that's exactly why this lesson is so important, especially now. It's like a call to action to be more mindful. More like detectives when we see something that seems suspicious or confusing. To pause, gather evidence, ask questions, and most importantly, resist that urge to jump to conclusions based on like incomplete or biased information. Like that saying, right? When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We got to be aware of the mental tools we're using to see the world. and make sure they're not warping our view.
For sure. Now, here's another thing that stuck with me from this episode, how it celebrates those characters who are a little different. Our source calls this lesson, embrace your eccentric neighbors. Maple Street has all these quirky people who don't exactly fit in. And you know what? They're usually the first ones to get targeted when everyone starts freaking out and getting suspicious.
It's kind of sad, isn't it? Because the people who are willing to stand out to question things, they often bring fresh ideas and insights to the table. Like, innovation usually comes from those who see things differently.
Oh, totally. Like Charlie, the guy who's into astronomy in the episode, he likes to stay up late looking at the stars. But as soon as things get weird on Maple Street, everyone starts whispering like, oh, he's probably talking to the aliens.
It's almost funny how fast his love for astronomy turns into something suspicious. But it shows how important it is to have different ways of thinking and different experiences. When we welcome people who are different from us, who think differently, who have different backgrounds and interests, it makes our communities stronger and more resilient.
It's like, instead of being scared of the neighbor with the purple mailbox, maybe we should ask them where they got that awesome paint, Be curious about their story instead of assuming the worst.
I love that. Different doesn't mean dangerous. Most of the time it means creativity, innovation, a more exciting and interesting world for everyone.
So think about your own life for a second. Who are those eccentric people in your world? And what can you learn from the ones who don't quite fit the mold? Something to think about.
Okay, now for lesson number 4, which gets kind of deep. Don't let others write your horror story. And this is where the episode gets really smart. The aliens or whatever is causing all the weirdness on Maple Street, they never actually show up. They just shake things up a little bit, give things a nudge, and then they sit back and watch human nature take over.
It's like they're these puppet masters playing with our deepest fears and prejudices, watching us tear each other apart without having to lift a finger.
And in a way, isn't that kind of what's happening all the time online? We're constantly bombarded with information, with stories competing for our attention, trying to shape how we think and what we do. It's so easy to get caught up in the drama, to let others control our thoughts and feelings without even realizing it.
It's a reminder that being able to think for yourself and being smart about what you see online is more important now than ever. We got to be aware of who's telling the stories we're listening to, what their motives are, and whether those stories are based on facts or just clever manipulation.
Right. Because when we're not careful, we become like characters in someone else's story without even knowing it. We become the residents of Maple Street, acting out a script someone else wrote, fueled by our own fear and anxiety.
So here's a question to think about. What stories are shaping your view of the world? Are you actively choosing what to believe, what voices to listen to, or are you letting others write your horror story?
It's a scary thought, but it's something we all have to deal with in today's world. Now, in the middle of all the chaos and fear on Maple Street, there's this one character who stands out. The voice of reason. The one who tries to stay calm and think straight. Our source calls this lesson, calm is still revolutionary.
This one really hit home for me because in a world that seems obsessed with drama and making us anxious, choosing to stay calm, to think clearly, to not get swept up in the panic, that's a powerful way to resist.
I agree. It's like Pete Van Horn in the episode. While everyone else is losing it, he's trying to figure out what's actually happening to calm people down, to remind them that there's probably a logical explanation for everything. And of course, what happens to him?
He becomes the enemy because when a mob gets going, anyone who questions the story they've all decided on is seen as a threat.
Exactly. It's like calm is contagious too.
Yeah.
But in a good way, it can be the cure for the fear and panic.
And this lesson isn't just about surviving some fake alien invasion. It's about dealing with all the stress and information overload we face every day. How can we be more calm, think more critically, be more resilient in a world that's constantly trying to push our buttons?
Well, one way is to practice mindfulness. To be present in the moment, to notice our thoughts and feelings without letting them take over, to create that space between what happens and how we react so we can choose how to respond instead of just reacting automatically.
And maybe take a break from the constant news and social media every once in a while, Step back from the digital Maple Street, unplug from all the noise, and reconnect with the real world, with nature, with things that ground us and bring us peace.
Absolutely. Because sometimes the best way to fight the monsters, the real ones and the ones we imagine, is to just turn down the volume, ignore the distractions, and listen to the quiet.
It's crazy how a show from like 60 years ago can still feel so relevant today. As we wrap up our deep dive into The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, it's pretty clear this isn't just some sci-fi story. It's like a reflection of something real, something human,
It's like a warning, isn't it? Reminding us that the monsters we're scared of, the ones that mess up our lives and turn us against each other, are usually inside us. our own fears and prejudices, especially when someone's messing with them and making them seem bigger than they are.
That's what it's all about, right? The monsters aren't always the ones we think they are. Not the aliens or the boogeymen hiding in the dark. The real monsters are like our own assumptions, the stuff we just react to without thinking, our willingness to let fear make decisions for us.
And those monsters are just as real now as they were back then. You could even say they're stronger now with all this instant information and echo chambers where fear and lies can spread so easily.
Because it just takes a few clicks to share a rumor or a conspiracy theory to make everyone panic and distrust each other. And once those ideas take root, it's really hard to get rid of them.
Exactly. So as you go about your day, your week, your life, I want you to think about those Maple Street moments that pop up. Those times when you feel that fear, that urge to blame someone else for the problems you're facing.
Because noticing those moments, that's the first step to choosing a different way to react. A way that's more reasonable, more understanding, more critical. A way where we don't jump to conclusions and instead try to really understand what's going on to get the facts to listen to different points of view.
Because the truth is out there, but it's hardly ever simple.
Yeah.
It's not black and white. And it usually means we got to do the work to dig a little deeper, question what we think we know, and be open to changing our minds when we learn something new.
So next time you find yourself in the online version of Maple Street, remember the stuff we talked about today? Remember how powerful it is to think for yourself how important empathy is and how brave it is to stay calm and rational when everyone else is freaking out?
Because choosing to stay calm, to think things through, to choose kindness instead of suspicion, that's how we break free from being afraid all the time and change the ending to our own stories.
And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, we can stop the monsters from taking over Maple Street for good. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those important questions.